Isaiah 53 was written centuries before Jesus, yet it describes events that sound unmistakably like the crucifixion. Some call it coincidence, others call it prophecy. But what did Isaiah actually mean when he wrote these words? In this video, we will carefully break down Isaiah 53 and explore why it remains one of the most powerful chapters in the Bible. In the 8th century BCE, the small kingdom of Judah found itself surrounded by danger. To the north, the Assyrian Empire pushed its borders deeper into the Levant, swallowing cities and forcing smaller nations into submission. The Taylor Prism and the Chicago Prism, inscribed with the boasts of King Sennacherib, record the siege of Jerusalem in 701 BCE and the destruction of Lachish, painting a picture of a people living under the shadow of invasion. Archaeologists have uncovered layers of ash and toppled city walls at sites like Lachish and Arad, evidence of the violence that swept through the land. These were not distant threats. They pressed on daily life, shaping every decision from the palace to the smallest village. Inside Jerusalem, Isaiah served in the royal court, watching as kings like Ahaz and Hezekiah struggled to balance tribute payments, alliances, and the fear of deportation. The Nimrod tablet lists Judah among the vassal states, a reminder that survival often meant compromise. Yet the crisis was not only political. Excavations at Kirbet Qeiyafa and other sites reveal a society divided in its worship. Asherah figurines and Baal amulets sit alongside altars dedicated to Yahweh, showing that many households blended old Canaanite practices with the faith of their ancestors. Prophets like Isaiah condemned this syncretism, warning that faithlessness would bring ruin as surely as any foreign army. In this climate of fear and uncertainty, the idea of a servant who would bear the suffering of the people began to take shape. The trauma of siege, the humiliation of tribute, and the longing for renewal all pressed the community to seek meaning in their pain. Isaiah's words about a suffering servant offered more than comfort. They became a way to understand how loss, exile, and even defeat could be transformed into hope for healing and restoration. Isaiah's poetry introduces a figure called the servant, but the identity of this servant has fueled debate for centuries. The Hebrew text itself is elusive, sometimes speaking in the singular, "He was despised, he bore our griefs," and other times hinting at a group identity through subtle shifts in pronouns and verb forms. This ambiguity opens the door to competing interpretations, each drawing from the grammar, the structure of the so-called servant songs, and the larger story of Israel. Many Jewish scholars, following the tradition of Rashi in the 11th century, read the servant as the nation of Israel. In this view, the singular language is a poetic device. Just as a sports team might be called the champion, Israel is cast as a single suffering figure, absorbing the world's scorn and carrying the wounds of exile and oppression. Rashi points to passages like Isaiah 49 verse 3, where the servant is named outright as Israel. And he draws on a long rabbinic tradition that sees the servant as a symbol of the people's collective experience. Others see the servant as an individual, perhaps a prophet, a future leader, or a unique representative of the nation. They note the sudden shift from plural to singular in Isaiah 53 verse 3, and the intimate personal language describing rejection and pain. For these readers, the servant cannot be a faceless group, but must be a real person who stands in for many. Christian interpreters go further, reading the servant as the promised Messiah. They point to the pattern of suffering and vindication, and to New Testament texts that quote Isaiah 53 as a prophecy fulfilled in Jesus. In this view, the servant songs form a progression, from a mission to the nations, to deep personal suffering, to ultimate triumph, culminating in a figure who brings redemption not just to Israel, but to the world. The text's shifting pronouns, layered metaphors, and four-song structure ensure that no single answer is simple. The debate is not just academic, it shapes how millions understand suffering, hope, and the possibility of deliverance. The poem slows to describe the servant's suffering in stark, unflinching terms. He is called despised, the Hebrew word nivzeh, a word that means not only rejected but counted as worthless, someone others turn away from in disgust. The text says he was a man of pains, familiar with sickness, and people hid their faces from him. There is no hint of dignity or honor here, only isolation and shame. The servant is wounded, mekolal, a word that can mean pierced or fatally struck. He is crushed, not by accident, but as one who bears the pain of others. The Hebrew grammar piles up passive verbs. He was oppressed, he was afflicted, he was led like a lamb to slaughter, yet he does not open his mouth. Silence becomes his only answer to accusation and violence. The poem lingers on this silence, repeating it like a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. The passage moves from humiliation to injustice. The servant is taken away by oppression and judgment, cut off from the land of the living. His grave is assigned with the wicked, but he is buried with the rich, a detail that stands out in the ancient world where burial among the wealthy was rare for those condemned. The Hebrew text gives no explanation, only the bare facts. He had done no violence, and no deceit was in his mouth. The weight of suffering is left to hang, unresolved, inviting the listener to pause and consider what it means for someone to endure all this without protest or defense. A single day each year, the Day of Atonement, brought the entire nation of Israel to a standstill. In the heart of the temple, the high priest washed, dressed in pure linen, and took 2 goats from the people. One was chosen for sacrifice, the sin offering or chatat. Its blood was sprinkled on the mercy seat, a sign that even unintentional sins needed cleansing. The second goat, the scapegoat, carried a different burden. The priest pressed both hands onto its head and confessed aloud all the wrongs, failures, and guilt of the people. In that moment, the nation's iniquities were symbolically transferred onto the animal. This goat was then led out into the wilderness beyond the camp, never to return. The act was more than ritual. It pictured guilt being carried away, removed from the people so that they could stand clean before God. The Hebrew words for these offerings, asham for guilt and chatat for sin, carry distinct meanings. Chatat dealt with the stain of sin, while asham addressed the debt or liability that sin created. The scapegoat ritual combined both. It covered the people's wrongdoing and removed their guilt. This background helps explain Isaiah's language about the servant who bears our iniquities and is led away. For Isaiah's first audience, the image was clear. To bear iniquity was to take on the community's guilt, to absorb the consequences that others deserved, and to make restoration possible. The servant's suffering, then, was not just a story of pain. It was the logic of atonement, rooted in the rhythms of temple worship and the hope of being made whole. In the years after Jesus' death, his followers turned to Isaiah's ancient poem and found words that seemed to echo everything they had witnessed. The story told in Acts chapter 8 captures this moment of recognition. Along a desert road, an Ethiopian official sat in his chariot, reading Isaiah 53 aloud. He was puzzled. Who was this suffering figure, cut off from life, yet somehow vindicated? Philip, one of the early Christian witnesses, joined him and explained how the passage described what had just taken place in Jerusalem. The language of being pierced, of being silent before accusers, and of being assigned a grave with the wicked matched the details of the crucifixion. More than that, the poem's closing lines, "He will see light and be satisfied," were taken as a sign of resurrection, a return from death. For these first believers, Isaiah's words were not distant poetry. They became a lens through which the suffering and rising of Jesus made sense, both as tragedy and as hope fulfilled. Isaiah 53 continues to shape the heart of Christian belief long after its words were first spoken. For centuries, its lines have formed the backbone of doctrines about salvation and atonement. Early church leaders quoted the poem as proof that suffering could lead to redemption, not just for one nation, but for all humanity. In the 4th century, the language of the servant became central to creeds and confessions, weaving itself into prayers and hymns sung across generations. Martin Luther called Isaiah 53 the 5th gospel, seeing in it the clearest summary of Christ's mission. Handel set its verses to music in his Messiah, and countless artists have painted the Man of Sorrows, drawing from the poem's haunting imagery. In worship services, during Lent or Holy Week, Christians return to these words, reflecting on what it means for someone to bear the weight of others' wrongs. The servant's story has become a lens through which believers understand forgiveness, sacrifice, and hope that endures beyond suffering. Today, Isaiah's ancient words still provoke debate, devotion, and doubt, shaping how millions wrestle with suffering, hope, and meaning. Whether seen as fulfilled prophecy or enduring mystery, this passage refuses to fade. Its questions remain as urgent and as personal as ever. If you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe.